Hey there, Dr. Craig Chalquist. This is a follow-up on my video on Persephone and Hades in the United States. Sorry about the background noise. I'm outside. There's nothing I can do about it. So a few points. Interesting comments, and I wanted to respond to a couple of them that in the story I told yesterday about Persephone being abducted. Some folks were saying things like she wasn't really raped, she went voluntarily and Hades honored her and so on. So a few things about that. We've got this story from some early versions. I'll mention three of them. So in Hesiod's Theogony, there's a very brief mention of the story. And Hades and Persephone are down in the underworld where he brought her. And in a couple of later versions, so the Homeric hymn to Demeter, for instance, has a much longer version of the story. And it's very clear that Hades abducted her, forced her into his bed, and married her against her will. That's rape. And then we also have Ovid's Metamorphoses. And in the Metamorphoses is a small version of the tale, and it basically agrees with the abduction and so on. So, you know, we can play with the stories. I often encourage my students to do that, rewrite them in a way that speaks to you. But the way the stories were is the way the stories were. So on the national level, there's a part of the story that I didn't mention yesterday that could use a little bit of comment. So we have right now a president who is convicted of sexual assault, and millions of people are supporting him, apologizing for him, and defending him. And so in the story, when Persephone is assaulted, most of the gods are either silent or from their comments seem like they're going along with it, and even facilitated it, like Zeus and Aphrodite, for instance. So I think there's a parallel there that's worth thinking about. And also in this mix were a couple of truth-telling gods, namely Helios and Hecate, who told Demeter what actually happened to her daughter. And it's that truth-telling that moves things toward not a complete resolution, but a change in the situation, that Persephone herself, and to me this is the most interesting part of the story, she uses the situation and remakes it in such a way that she is empowered and comes fully into her strength and voice in spite of what happened to her, which doesn't forgive it at all. So myths are open to multiple interpretations, and that's one of the things that keeps them alive. So when you hear somebody talk about a myth with the attitude, this is what it means, what they're actually doing, whether they recognize it or not, is turning it into an ideology, and it loses its aliveness when that happens. So there's multiple ways of holding these stories. A question was raised too about why they repeat. I think it's mysterious ultimately, but one possible parallel is in how we repeat the worst parts of our family histories and our relationships. So, you know, you had a controlling father and then you end up in relationships with somebody who's like that. So Freud and Jung and 100 years of psychotherapy, more than 100 at this point, have pointed out examples of that in detail. Those of us who've been in therapy know how that works or have done therapy. The same thing happens historically. The philosopher Santayana pointed out that we repeat the histories that we don't become, to use psychological language, conscious of, that we don't know. And myths are like that too. They're like pieces or weavings of collective psychology with lessons embedded in them, among other things. And so if we ban the books and the tellings, all we do is guarantee that we live out the myths again and again in their most destructive forms. So one of 6,848 reasons why the humanities are important. Thanks.